And we're back.
And we're back. That was a long time between episodes, eh?
I think it's normal for our channel, I'd say.
I guess we have very short seasons and
Yeah.
long between them. Well, we've watched some good stuff. There's lots of exciting things going on, so let's just jump right into it. We're going to talk today about the movie that followed The Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me, and we're also going to talk about
iRobot.
iRobot, and maybe even look forward to second season of Silo. So,
Yeah.
where do you want to start?
Um, I think let's start with the first one we watched, The Man of the Golden Gun. Sorry, The Spy Who Loved Me. I've got to say, the movie itself is interesting. I kind of understand it. The premise being, James, the British and the Russians have to work together to try to locate nuclear capable submarines, and it involves an old man who I think just has gone tired of the world and thus wants to make everyone live in underwater pods.
Yeah,
Um,
he wants to blow up the world. He wants to destroy the world and recreate the world underneath, in underwater, basically.
right. So he wants to do what Elon Musk wants to do, live in pods, but still on Earth.
Right. And I think what's interesting and important. I mean, I think one of the neat things for us to watch movies together, recent movies, somewhat, 20
Hmm.
years ago movies and like 40 or 50 years ago movies and beyond is to look at this is about a bit about sci-fi, right? And so it's to look at what they perceived as sci-fi back then and how they perceived the future and that
Hmm.
sort of stuff. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the themes, that we're trying to get at on this amazing podcast channel.
Yeah.
And to start with, that movie took was made in, around 1975, 76, and is super, or 74, 75, 76, is super aware of the oil crisis that's just
Hmm.
happened in like 1973, 74, where all of a sudden the price of oil went skyrocketing and the supply was cut off. And all of a sudden, everyone was like scrambling. And for a brief moment, people were like, oh, let's use our bicycles. Let's, you know, let's look into solar or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And so in this case, there's an environmental aspect to the movie because this is
Hmm.
one of the first times, and it's sort of environmental from a lack of supply, not environmental from we're going to we've got a carbon crisis or whatever. but
Right.
but that's kind of the time period that this movie was made, right? And sometimes a movie is made in the time period, and by the time it comes out, it's different or whatever. But anyways,
Hmm.
that's kind of part of it. So in a way, it's like the bad guy wants to kill the humans because they're, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? He
They're
wants to,
abusing Mother Nature, so I have to make everyone nuke each other.
yeah, exactly. That's what it is, though. It's like some kind of God complex where he wants to recreate the world underwater, right?
Right. Yeah.
And anyway, so one, two, Man with a Golden Gun, which came out a couple years before, was kind of the first movie I remember seeing, and and this movie, and so these are like big movies when I was like 8, 10, 12, or whatever.
Hmm.
And um but I've only watched them a couple of times. And like I really didn't, if you'd asked me what this movie was about, I wouldn't have remembered, I would remember the car, right? Like
Hmm.
the Lotus, also because our uncle owned a very similar car at the time, and couldn't go underwater. But like, so the car and the going underwater and all of that
Right.
was like a really cool thing about the movie. That's what I remember. I didn't remember who the bad guy was until we
Right.
started watching it and what the premise was and all that stuff, sort of. Um,
Mhm.
anyways, it's just it's interesting, kind of like what you carry forward from a movie
Right.
that you've only watched once, kind of, and when you go back and watch it, you're like, I was totally watching it for the
Yeah.
so much of it for the first time.
Mm. So I'm gonna. So here's some things I rather enjoy about the movie. The first thing is Triple X, the female counterpart to James Bond.
Yeah, Barbara
To
Bach,
me, sorry,
actress is
Barbara.
Barbara Bach, I think.
Right. I've got to say, my she is my favorite James Bond character. Like she, she, she's just in. Like
She was
she's a
always outwitting him, right? Like
right.
I don't remember it.
Exactly.
I don't remember that at all either. Like like there was although there was a lot of like sex and sexism still in this movie
Hmm.
compared to Goldfinger, I think it's kind of like they did something very differently with the female character, right?
Right. Exactly. A lot of the female characters in the last movie, actually, no, all of the female characters in the last movie
And
wanted to
all of
sleep
the
with James
female
Bond.
characters in all the movies before that, pretty much.
Yeah, but this is the first movie where a female character is an equal to James
Right.
Bond. She doesn't just let him walk all over.
No,
She
she's one step ahead of him, which is
yeah.
also interesting because I don't, like I'll have to rewatch a bunch of James Bonds and stuff, but I don't remember him kind of being made to look the fool so often,
Mhm.
right? In a way, like
Right.
there was quite a few times where she did that to him,
Right, yeah. I can't exactly say remember any specific scene, but yeah, no, she definitely was
Like she
like
was like
an
one
act.
step ahead of him a few
Yeah,
times,
yeah, definitely. Like I think only a few times, just enough to make sure that like, hey guys, James Bond is still the main character. But for the time, she is like, to me at least, like the Princess Leia. Like she is not just like a sitting duck and like, waiting for James Bond to help her. She
Yeah,
gets stuff done and like goes around and like, gets the information. She kicks ass, takes names. She's an
right.
awesome character.
Yeah.
I personally like her a lot more than James Bond because at least in the last movie, James Bond can't keep it in his pants and is not nice to anyone
Yeah.
if they don't look like him. Like
Yeah,
he
it's true. It's
oh
true.
my
It's true. You're right, bud. You're very, very astute in the sense that in those days and who James Bond was, he's just kind of like he's just passing through, right? Like he might find a fancy in you, but like if you fall off the train, he's not too worried about it.
yeah, no, but she is one step ahead of him, and I think that what makes him so interested in her, kind of like he's never had a woman be smarter than him and
Yeah,
actually get stuff done.
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna point out one of my little things. Usually I'm hyper focused on like what they do with transportation and that sort of stuff in
Mhm.
sci-fis, and James Bond isn't really a sci-fi, although the gadgets are sci-fi,
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
But uh and I definitely think there was I mean, maybe James Bond has always been this way, but I really feel like that the movies that come a little bit later, like maybe two, three, four movies after this, really get campy, and I just didn't enjoy it.
Can't be like staying in one setting, like
No,
one zone.
campy, like silly, sort of. You know what
Mm,
I mean? Like over the top, stupid kind of battles and thing. Like
right.
unbelievable, silly, sort of like
Hmm.
comedy. Not
Like
not serious.
fight, like so, like you're talking about like maybe like fights that like where characters like are moving around all over the place and like it doesn't actually feel real, like like they're
That
struggling and
and
stuff.
like I don't know, I can't. There's some movie that comes a little bit later than this where there's like a tank and it runs over a statue, and the top of the statue lands on the tank, and it's just like a comedy, sort of,
Mm,
and
yeah.
that's where I took a break on James Bond until
Hmm.
the um uh the most recent James Bond and I blank Craig
Right.
whatever his
Mhm.
actor's name
Yeah.
is, came in. But anyways, one I just want to say this one thing I really noted, like it's like again, I was watching this for the first time. I'm so curious what people thought back then, but the M, who is the head of the MI5 or whatever the secret
MI6, I think. Yeah.
MI6 or whatever the secret thing is, right? James goes into his office and it's this old-fashioned British, you know what I mean, from the 1800s or whatever, and there's a fireplace behind him and it's running, right? And
And
so
they're like, sorry, go ahead.
it's like I don't know, like it's not a gas fireplace, it's a real fireplace, right? And I guess it's an old building and maybe it's hard to heat, and so they have a wood fireplace, and that's but it gives this like rich, luxurious kind of feeling
Mhm.
to it. And then the bad guy dude in the pod underneath 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea there, he had a fireplace running in his pod, like a full-on fireplace. And I
Right.
thought it was so whack.
Like, I think to me that is something like a show of wealth
Right.
in it,
Yeah,
like it like
luxury,
right.
something. Yeah.
It's like a show of luxury, and to me, like it's not just like a show of luxury. It's a stupid show of luxury. Like I have
Yeah.
a fireplace under the water.
Under the ocean. Yeah.
How do you get
Yeah.
rid of the smoke?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, no discussion of The Spy Who Loved Me can be complete without Jaws, the
Right?
super tall guy with razor
Metal
sharp teeth.
teeth. Yeah.
That was that like beat the shark and swam from the middle of the ocean and did all these crazy things because he's in at least one more movie, and he
Mhm.
was like the big hit of the movie. Like he became this like kind of sensation,
Mhm.
kind of memey kind of thing back in the day before memes. And anyways, that he was a big deal from that time,
Mhm.
and yeah,
I also enjoy the certain places that the movie takes us. Like, for example, they take us to like I think Cairo at one point,
right, yeah,
which which in a lot of different ways is really interesting. For one, it's on like a view of this being in the middle of the desert, and then like the main villain being in the ocean underwater. Like I think to me that's cool. Like the opposites.
and
The and then there's that weird thing where like everyone in the city, I guess, goes out and like listen to this one guy talk about the ancient pyramids right behind them. He's like, that's a bit tad
yeah,
strange.
that was pretty crazy. That and I think it also shows kind of like how old-fashioned things were back then because today there's the internet. You could call up and see a live view of downtown Cairo right now if you wanted to.
Yeah,
Sure,
you could
right?
go on Google Maps right now and look and see the
Yeah,
pyramids.
Google Maps, you could call someone, you could find, you could whatever, right? Like there you
Right.
but in those days you couldn't, right? And so
Mhm.
Cairo is still portrayed as this like ancient, strange place and that sort of stuff. And obviously it's culturally different than London or New York or Toronto, but
Right.
back then the it's almost like the movie was made 40 years ago or whatever, 50
Mhm.
years ago, almost 50 years ago, but like that portrayal of Cairo makes it seem so much more distant, camels and
Right. Right.
rugs and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like there was like a scene where they're like hunting for the guy, like this one guy who has information out. Well, like everyone's like watching the guy talk. They're hunting this like the sharks guys going after this one guy, bites him in the neck, and like it's at night, and like there's this guy talking about the ancient pyramids and the pharaohs and all that stuff,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like it's really imposing. And then another time they're hiding from Jaws with Triple X and 007 in like an abandoned like old ancient Egyptian like area. Like and we don't know what it is. It's just like a structure and like people and they're hiding from it. It's really cool. Like it's interesting to see this like massive ancient architecture as opposed to the main villain submarine with the fireplace. Like,
Right. Yeah, and I think of what I was getting at is that in that day and age, they could portray Cairo as in any way they wanted to. And I don't know, maybe that was totally the way it was in 1975 and it's changed since then or whatever. But it just seems that because we had so little connection and so little exposure to it that they could kind of make it seem like something for the movie more than it
mm,
probably really was, you know?
I I would say that with before the advent of the internet, movies were one of the few ways that, like middle class or below people could see the world. Because like this
Well,
was
a
this
long
was
time ago. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
TV,
no,
like
yeah.
news and everything, right? Like people were watching the news and you could see Cairo on the news at 6 o'clock.
Right. But this was
But
like one of the few ways that like people could see like one of the ways that people could see Egypt. And like because of that, movie makers could like
uh,
show us the way that they wanted people to think.
yeah, I
But
mean, I think
now,
that's all. Yeah.
but now with the internet, we can see the pyramids and
Well,
stuff.
and plus, there's so many people that live in big cities that are from
Mhm.
everywhere around the world and all that.
Right.
Like it's not that there isn't some awesome culture in Egypt. It's just that
Definitely, yeah, there
they
is.
kind of were almost portraying like a 19th century, like as if. Anyways, I just feel a little bit like I wonder whether they were making it seem, more old fashioned than it really was at the time or
Mhm.
whatever. Anyways, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. So
That they were
I
really
really,
using it as a prop. They wanted it to be
yeah.
this like exotic place and stuff, and maybe it was still,
Yeah.
but it's anyways.
It reminds me of like I think at least one scene where James Bond is in Egypt and like one of the guys like one of his like contacts and please lay with these beautiful women or something and like
Right.
it
I know.
makes me like this is an amazing movie though we still have to think about like that part where James Bond goes up to this guy who got bitten by the shark and like lays an out of order sign on him
Right.
or like
Yeah, I mean there are some goofy parts in this, and he does
mhm,
like, it's still pretty constantly there's everyone is having sex or getting offered sex or whatever
yeah
it is throughout the whole thing. But
but yeah
anyway,
like Triple X to me was what
yeah,
made this movie
yeah,
amazing. She's an
yeah, yeah,
amazing, like, go-getter girl
yeah.
who makes sure that James Bond doesn't to get away with everything he wants.
It's so interesting because Barbara Bach ended up going on to marry one of the Beatles, Ringo Starr, around this time, and she was in a few other movies, but she was always like, you know, not really respected as an actress or whatever.
Mm,
But rewatching this, she did a great job. She really
yeah.
did a great job. So that's yeah, it's good to remember.
Hmm.
All right, well let's jump on to the next movie that we watched that was only 20 years old, sci-fi
Hmm.
called iRobot
iRobot with Will Smith.
with Will Smith.
It's a really really good movie. It's not like Real Steel or something where like there's a few sci-fi things. This is set in like the
in the
future.
in
This
the
is
future. Yeah.
right. Like main thing, robots. There's humans have access to personal robots.
Yeah,
Um,
personal assistant
mhm,
robots with some, I don't know whether they call it AI or consider it AI, but they're definitely like fully functional robots, right? Like
mhm.
that's the idea like
I would say that there's only technically two real AIs because when I think of AI in the film sense, I think of AI as in thinking machine.
right.
But like the other robots were like programs that
Right.
had like a false personality basically set on them.
Basically the premise of the movie is that there's personal servant kind of robots and these robots are going through that technological situation where like people are afraid of them. Are they safe? Like what are they doing? Like they're
I
helping us, but they're
I would say that I personally I would say it's less about the safety and more about replacement. Like so we see in the movie that Will Smith's character is hyper paranoid about machines and is always trying to find a way to say, see, robots are evil. Look, they're dangerous because,
Yeah.
the dramatic thing, and also because, like, for example, at one point there a robot seen running and he like goes up to this guy like, hey, hold my pie. He's like, what? Hold it or you're wearing it. And then he
Right.
runs after this robot and it's just returning this woman's like asthma thing. And like,
He thought the robot had stolen somebody's purse,
right.
something like
So
that.
like
Yeah.
that's the thing. These robots are built like with the core tenets of like do no harm to humans, protect yourself, but only as long as it doesn't mess with, three laws of robotics. And like robots seem to be maybe replacing jobs for humans, but like I don't think they touched on it too much.
Right.
Robots in this world are like, I think, like back in the day, not everyone had, like in 2007, not everyone had an iPhone. Like like maybe like one person in every like
It only came out in
10.
2007. No one had an iPhone.
Right. No, like in the early 2000s, when phones are getting like people are getting iPhones, it was maybe like
No,
one person
iPhones
had
came
it.
out in the late 2000s,
Okay, yeah,
2007,
I'm
8, 9.
just saying like to me, the AIs, it's interesting to see that like AI seem to be affordable enough that like one in every five households can have a robot.
Right. Right.
And like I'm thinking like, newerish technology around that time, not everyone have it.
Right.
But yeah, like
You're comparing it. Yeah, I see. You're right. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Um, yeah, and I mean, look, the sci-fi about robots and humans and robots, a robot going rogue or wrong or
mhm,
whatever. I mean, it's in this case, the computers are in an Android uh format, right? We weren't
mhm.
talking about the computers necessarily, although there was a big computer running the whole thing, right?
Right, like I forget her name, but like she was
Yeah.
like
Yeah. So
a
there was
robot.
that kind of AI super intelligence. But basically, it was a story about robots and humans and
Hmm.
fear, et cetera, et cetera. And but in general, especially because it was 20 years ago and they couldn't have imagined the iPhone. Like that's the crazy thing, right? And a lot of
Yeah,
movies that are made like anything that was made before the iPhone came out, they could not imagine the iPhone, right? And they couldn't imagine
right. Yeah.
everything that happened after. So that's what's hard about technology nowadays is that it's moving so quickly that people can't, imagine forward. So there was always
Hmm.
robots, but for instance, there weren't like drones, there weren't flying robots, there weren't,
Right.
all that sort of stuff. For instance,
Hmm.
but I mean the general story and the kind of world that they created, right? And painted sort of, I thought was really good. And the story worked
Yeah.
out and the way they dealt with it. And there was some over the top battles
Funny
and
stuff.
not, but
Yeah.
but in general, it really like it's the kind of movie you can go back and watch and go, yeah, that's great. And they could remake it today and they could remake it
Hmm.
with better graphics or whatever, but
Yeah.
there's no real need to remake it.
Right. Because it's fine as it is.
Yeah.
A it's set in a time, like you said, before the iPhone. And if
Yeah.
you remade it, you'd probably lose that because, we have the iPhone now. Like,
Well,
yeah,
and
like,
to imagine like we're about to deal with this. Well, I think what we haven't said, right, is
yeah.
that we the reason we rewatched this was because of the Musk Tesla self-driving taxi, robo taxis and the
Robot buses.
robot buses and the robots the whatever I don't know,
Tesla robots.
was it Tesla that makes the robot?
Uh,
I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know, whatever. But all of that stuff, they just, Musk just had that big event recently, and then he got called out. He got called out for basically um, that his robots and his taxi and everything looked like the equipment from iRobot, right? The iRobot designer, whoever was getting, got upset with him because
yeah.
everything was ripped off from his own
Literally a thing like when Elon Musk showed off his like cyber like big cyber truck thing, he said
yeah,
like we robot and with like the Optimus robot which he has. That's the robot we're talking.
yeah,
Yeah,
Optimus.
like but it's also funny to see how Elon Musk is trying to do this stuff, but is not succeeding. Like, for example, we see in the movie that they have like a vehicle, like a road underneath the city or something, like in like tubes.
Oh
But
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're not allowed to draw hands-on drive it. You have to
Right.
the AI, the car drives it for you at like who knows how fast. And then
Yeah.
like when they park it, it's like sideways. Like,
Right. Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting, but actually that's, Musk was, Musk has built the boring company and the tunneling company and all that stuff. But it's true they were talking about hands-on and hands-off driving and
mhm.
that stuff. Anyways, it was, they did an interesting job of imagining certain things in the future, which is really hard for people, right? It's
Yeah,
really hard to
definitely.
imagine because the future is coming so quickly, but
Mhm.
people aren't sure what parts of it will happen and
Right.
but
Like they had like if you wanted to call someone, they had to like take out their like glass tablets and like look and stuff. But like now with the iPhone, we already do that, but it's not as futuristic looking like as that.
right. Yeah, I mean the whole glass thing, that's an
Mhm.
easy thing to like that's like still magic, right?
Right.
But what's interesting is that sometimes people don't use a Siri or a whatever, right? Like
Right.
they're not talking to their, I mean Star Trek you talk to your
Mhm.
computer and that seemed far-fetched, but
Now
now
we have Siri and like Alexa,
yeah, it's
whatever.
basically it's here, right? Like that
Mhm.
if somebody showed you a computer today that you could totally have a conversation with, it'd be cool, but it's not like you wouldn't believe it, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff
And
could show up anytime.
And then there's the thing with Sunny, the robot, the AI, the one of two actual AIs in the movie.
Yeah,
Sunny says like, I cannot draw like a human. I have had dreams, but I can't truly make a symphony. Unlike you, but can you
right,
make a symphony? And like, there's there's several funny things in the movie. For example, the Sunny learning how to blink.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Or or when the lawyers come to the police station and we could shut you down like that. And it's like
Oh yeah,
it's just really like but there's also things where like AI is talking about I can't, paint or anything. But now AIs can draw stuff. They
right.
can write stuff.
Yeah,
Not real human levels, but like it's like do robots dream of electric sheep?
right. Well, I was just, that's where clearly where we're heading, which is connected to Blade Runner, right? That's
Mhm.
the book that Blade Runner is basically based on and stuff. And so there's this theme, right? There's movies that are kind of remade every once in a while, or made that are similar themes, about robots and machines and, even like Terminator and, all that sort of stuff. But
Right,
anyways,
yeah.
I think this is a great movie. It really does hold up. And
Absolutely.
it's
There's
worth a watch if you haven't,
yeah, there's so
or
much to this movie. Like there's
yeah,
world
or
building that
rewatch if
they
you only
yeah,
watched it 20 years ago,
yeah, like there's so much like for example the world building of like, the bridge that I'm not sure like the destroyed bridge or like the fact that like the main character is like a machine implant and stuff. Like
Mhm.
there's so much cool world building of like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I
personalized
forgot I forgot
faceless.
that the Android dream is a big part
Mhm.
of
There's
this
so much to this movie that like I did not expect.
yeah. Yeah.
Like I thought that like Sonny was gonna be like a huge villain, but he's not.
Yeah.
It's an amazing movie, and I highly
Yeah.
recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. All right, well, let's talk about a few other things. I will say
Yeah,
I
and
started to watch a few movies with your younger brother. We rewatched Iron Man 1 and 2. Those have got some great things to chat
mhm.
about sometime. For instance, they were made on either side of the release of the iPhone, and it's so apparent and so interesting. The
Mhm.
world's richest man, who's I mean, Musk is in the second one, right? Like there's aspects of Musk and
Really?
Jobs. Yeah, and he's
Huh.
got a cameo in the second one. There's aspects of Musk and Jobs and all this stuff, and it's kind of really anyways, it's things that are going on in the world today. but even just talking about his tech, the world's richest man in that movie has in which came out in like 2008, I guess, so it would have been made in 2007. He's got this phone that's like, a sort of a whatever, like a basic phone, and then it has a little screen like this. And so he's looking at this phone with the little tiny video screen, and I don't know if it was real or not, but they basically were trying to imagine what was coming, but they couldn't
Right.
imagine that the whole thing, they couldn't imagine the iPhone, right? Like they were trying to, I mean, this is the world richest, you're making a movie about the world's richest guy. Like, don't let your mind go crazy. The biggest thing they could do is like glue a little screen onto the top of a phone. And
Yeah,
yet the iPhone was about to come out. And
yeah.
it's super interesting. Because then in the second one, there's like social media. They're trying to like talk about social media in it and stuff. Anyways, we can
Yeah.
watch it maybe chat about it. But
Yeah.
anyway, so I watched that, and I rewatched, as I was saying with your cousin, I rewatched Silo to get ready for season
Silo.
two. And
Right.
my gosh, I realized he hadn't seen it, which is really cool, and I introduced him to it. And so we watched the first episode a couple nights ago, and I realized I had totally mixed Silo and Fallout in my mind.
Hmm.
When we were watching it, I kept waiting for like all the people in colored suits to show up, but that was Fallout,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Fallout, not Fallout. I can't wait for Fallout, but season two. But
Silo.
Silo, yeah, Silo is coming out on the 15th, I think.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll have to watch it and
Yeah, just in 4 or 5 days now.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I'm rewatching the whole season. I'm like 4 episodes in. It's great. I mean, it's
right.
the world that within the silo, and
Right.
what is so nice is because it's contained,
Yeah.
that there are no like rules being broken. You know what I mean? There's
Hmm.
nothing that's crazy or whatever. Like, it's
Yeah.
this world that's and it's such an interesting way to do it, you know?
Right. It's so condensed, and because of it, somehow they can expand to like the entirety of the silo, like from
Right.
the top to the very bottom. Like it's amazing.
Yeah, and just for like a sci-fi, like, so they've spun up this world, but it's the only world that we get to see so far is within that silo, right?
Hmm.
And so it's not like you're watching this sci-fi and go, oh, that doesn't make sense, or why would they do that, or why, sometimes in a sci-fi they have these weird rules, and you're like, it doesn't make sense, or whatever.
Hmm.
But anyways, super excited for season two, super excited rewatching. And definitely we should take a look at
Yeah.
Iron Man again, and
Mhm.
some neat, just some interesting things about
Yeah.
sci-fi
A
and
lot of stuff, a lot of
that.
fun stuff.
Yeah. And what's the other one that's coming out soon? Silo, and thought there was another one, maybe not.
A Star Wars thing?
I don't know.
Not
Yeah.
sure.
All right.
Well, yeah,
Well,
and
that was
love.
that was good. Thanks, everyone. Subscribe and send us your questions. We're gonna have some guests on hopefully next time. Maybe
Yeah.
talking about Silo, and
Hmm.
maybe we'll watch that series and
Yeah.
and do some shows on that.
Mhm. All right. Until we meet again.
Till we meet again. Yeah. Keep subscribing.
Yeah. Stay safe out there.